Welcome to the Unit 11 Section 4 video on completing the square. We previously learned how to solve quadratic equations by taking square roots. For example, you have x minus 2 quantity squared equals 80. Take the square root of each side, keeping in mind that you have to do plus or minus the square root of 80. We can simplify that square root and add 2 to each side to get 2 plus or minus 4 square root of 5. Recall that perfect square trinomials are of the form of a plus or minus b squared equals a squared plus or minus 2ab plus b squared. We can take something that is a perfect square trinomial and factor it so that we can take the square root of each side and solve by taking square roots. So let's do a couple of examples where we solve by factoring a perfect square trinomial. So in A here, we have some trinomial is equal to 9. Now, normally we would want to get the set equal to 0 and try to factor, but we already recognize what's on the left-hand side is a perfect square trinomial. So we can go ahead and factor that into x minus 5 quantity squared is equal to 9, and then take the square root of each side, which would leave us with x minus 5 equals plus or minus 3, and then add 5 to each side, and then go ahead and get our two solutions of 2 and 8 when we do 5 plus 3 and 5 minus 3. We can do the same thing with this example as well. We have a perfect square trinomial on the left, so we can go ahead and factor it into x plus 6 quantity squared, take the square root of each side, go ahead and simplify the square root on the right side, and subtract 6 from each side to get the solution of negative 6 plus or minus 4 square root of 3. Unfortunately, not all trinomials are perfect squares. However, we can rewrite an equation to create a perfect square trinomial so that we can solve using square roots. This is called completing the square. To solve a quadratic equation in the form x squared plus bx equals c, first complete the square of x squared plus bx, then factor and solve by taking square roots. So how do we achieve this? First, write the equation in the form x squared plus bx equals c. So get your constant to the right side of your equation. Next, find b divided by 2 squared. Then complete the square by adding that result to both sides of the equation. Then factor the perfect square trinomial, take the square roots of both sides, and then write two equations using both positive and negative square roots and solve each equation. So let's see what this looks like in an example. So we have x squared minus 12x minus 27 equals negative 4. What we're going to do is move that 27 over to the right side by adding it. So that gives us x squared minus 12x equals 23. Now we are going to complete the square on the left side. We need to take our b, which is negative 12, and we need to divide it by 2, which would give us 6. And then we're going to square it, which would give us 36. So we're going to add 36 to each side. Because remember, whatever you do to the left side, you must do to the right side. Those rules still apply. But what we have now is a perfect square trinomial that we have created on the left side. So we are going to take the square root of the first, sine of the middle, square root of the last, and give us x minus 6 quantity squared. 23 plus 36 on the right side gives us 59. Now we can solve by taking the square root of each side. So we take the square root of each side. We have plus or minus square root of 59. We are going to add 6 to each side, and we get 6 plus or minus the square root of 59. Square root of 59 cannot be simplified. For this other example, we've got x squared plus 4x minus 29 equals negative 3. We're going to add 29 to each side to give us x squared plus 4x equals 26. And now we're going to find the last term for our perfect square trinomial on the left. We're going to complete the square. So we're going to take our b, which is 4, divided by 2, which would give us 2, and then we're going to square it, which gives us 4 to add to each side. Now we're going to factor our perfect square trinomial on the left, which is going to give us the square root of the first, which is x, middle term sign, which is plus, square root of the last, which is 2, quantity squared. 26 plus 4 on the right gives us 30. Take the square root of each side, and then we're going to subtract 2 from each side to give us negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 30. To solve a quadratic equation in the form ax squared plus bx equals c, first divide both sides of the equation by a. Then complete the square of x squared plus bx, and finally factor and solve by taking square roots. So here's a more comprehensive look at the steps that you're going to take. First, collect variable terms on one side of the equation and constants on the other. As needed, divide both sides by a to make the coefficient of the x squared term 1. Then we're going to follow the steps that we had before. Complete the square by adding b over 2 quantity squared to both sides of the equation. Factor the variable expression as a perfect square. Take the square root of both sides of the equation. And then finally solve for the values of the variable. So let's take a look at some examples of how this works. So let's start with a here. So in a, we have a leading coefficient of 2. First thing we're going to do is move our constant to the right side. And now we're going to divide everything by 2. That's going to leave us with x squared minus 8x equals 38. Now we're going to complete the square on the left-hand side. So we take our b term, which is negative 8, divided by 2, which gives us negative 4, and square it, which gives us 16. So we're going to add 16 to both sides. When we do that, we're going to be able to factor the left side as a perfect square trinomial, giving us x minus 4 quantity squared. We add 38 and 16 on the right side to give us 54. Then we take the square root of each side. That's going to give us x minus 4 on the left, plus or minus the square root of 54, which we can break up as the square root of 9 times 6. Taking the square root of 9 to the outside gives us 3 square root of 6, and adding the 4 to each side gives us 4, plus or minus 3 square root of 6. For this example, we are first going to add 15 to each side. Then we are going to divide everything by our a term, which is 5. So we are going to divide everything by 5 to get our leading coefficient of 1. Then we're going to complete the square on the left-hand side, which is going to be adding 4 to each side. Then we are going to factor the left side as a perfect square trinomial. We'll add the two numbers, the two constants on the right side. Take the square root of each side. Plus or minus the square root of 9 on the right side gives us plus or minus 3. Add 2, and you get 2 plus or minus 3, which we can get our two answers fairly easily. 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. So our two solutions are negative 1 and 5. Thanks for checking out my video in the Algebra 1 Honor Series. You can subscribe to my channel. I've got the next video queued up for you. And if you need to check out any of the videos in the course, I've got the course playlist for you here as well. Thanks for watching.